Hi guys, my name is Christina and welcome to my channel and welcome to yet another episode of the podcast. And actually this episode I'm recording third time, not the drawing part, but the voiceover part. And I don't know, something I couldn't decide what I wanted to talk about on this podcast because to be honest, what I'm drawing this weekend is grass, and I already drew grass, and I already did a whole episode when I was talking a lot and excessively about grass. And I think, I don't remember the name of this episode, but I'm gonna link it down below. But honestly, because I already talked about the grass, I feel like it's gonna be a little bit redundant for me to get to another episode and talk about grass some more. But at the same time, this is exactly what I'm drawing. I'm going to be drawing just exactly the grass. So I'm going to try to talk about other things in this drawing session and about another things that I'm drawing for it rather than grass. For the grass, I'm going to mention just a couple of things that I don't think I mentioned in that other episode. But yeah, so I just couldn't decide what I wanted to talk about, and both two times that I recorded something, I wasn't quite satisfied with what I was talking about. I just thought it's not as informative as it could have been. And something else that I was talking about, I realized it could be just my standard video that I can record, because it just doesn't have to be talked during drawing session. So complicated feelings, complicated. But yeah, traditionally I'm starting every episode of my drawing session podcast by comparing the time I spent drawing this weekend with the time I spent last weekend. And last weekend was amazing. As you remember, it was a humongous video that actually sped up even more than I usually speed up my videos. So it would have been with the same sped up level even longer than it ended up being. But this one is on the very short side, and actually everything that you see me draw in this particular video is everything that I draw in the very end of Sunday. So I had some things to do on Saturday. I was literally running around town, doing all sorts of errands, like, you know, as you would do as an adult. I had to do a lot of boring things that I would procrastinate it, you know, send a return. I was sending my scooter to Montreal to get fixed, my electric scooter. But yeah, so there was a lot of things to do. And on Sunday, I had to actually complete a freelance. I'm doing freelance for this company that I work with for several projects already. They're pretty cool. They're called D-Brand. And I did actually a VFX video for them for MKHDB, the tech YouTuber. We did a campaign for this guy, and I did a VFX for this video. Anywho, this is one of my favorite clients to work with. Because any client that is recurring is one of my favorites to work with. I like that. But yeah, I had to prepare some stuff for D-Brand, so I needed to work with them. So the thing is, I, for example, know that I can do this freelance in 4 hours, not the complete thing, but for example, a session that I need to deliver. So, but then I know that I can draw if I want to draw right now, and then in the end I can deliver this freelance. But something that happens with me and freelances, it doesn't happen with me in my day job. For example, I can wake up at 7 a.m. and then I can draw till 9 a.m. and then get to my day job. However, with freelancers, I guess because they're more, you know, you decide your own time. There is no fixed time that you're supposed to work. Like the pay doesn't work this way. You have to complete the work rather than do the hours that are also calculated by management and whatnot. So in that case, every time I try to draw prior to the freelance, I cannot actually focus on drawing because I know that something is hanging over me that I need to start to finish. And I just cannot focus on drawing. So I try, and maybe actually, if you guys remember a couple of sessions ago, I was not quite in a drawing mood, and actually it is because also there was a couple of freelances hanging over that I needed to do right after, and I knew that I didn't need to do it right away, but I knew there was a list that I need to go through. So my mind was always thinking about all those things that I need to deliver. So I realized it's new discovery that I made in my with working process, that I really need to get freelance out of the way, otherwise it's mentally blocking me from drawing. I just keep worrying about work and cannot really enjoy drawing. It's almost start treating drawing as work. almost like I try to complete this before that, so I don't like the vibe. So as I realized that on Sunday, I decided that I'm gonna do freelance first, and then whatever time I have spent, I'm gonna spend on drawing. So this is something that I was doing on Sunday. And so I got to drawing almost in the end of the day because, it's also Sunday and there's also other things I need to do. I need to get my Starbucks. I need to get to my bike ride. I need to hug my dog. Yada, yada, yada. So basically, when I got to drawing, I didn't have much time to spend and I decided to just work on this panel and just finish background for this panel. So how does this panel work is what I have here is that I have this woods and those creatures are jumping from the woods and start running towards the camera and towards our characters. Usually, you guys know I separate background from characters, but in this case, what I typically would do, I would separate those creatures from the background and draw background separately and those creatures separately. However, what you don't see for this panel, also I have characters standing on the background very closed in, so they're going to be defocused because they're very close to the camera. And those creatures, I wanted to really focus on drawing them and they kind of interact with background a little bit. I have to adjust trees a little bit as they're shaking them and they're running away. And basically, I need to customize the background anyway for this particular close-up because it's the closest we are seeing this forest in and it needed a little bit up-res. So I decided to treat this panel with the creatures as a background, as like a full-on its own painting, and then I would be drawing the characters on top. So for this session on Sunday, I decided I'm just going to finish this panel drawing forest with those creatures. So this was the plan, and this is literally what I've been doing. And because, as you guys know about the grass, is that it takes surprising amount of time to draw grass, which is, it has to be drawn though. I know that I don't need to draw the grass, these details, but I just really like it. I think it adds just complexity and shows the level. Anywho, and just a little thing that I wanted to add about drawing grass in this particular video, in addition to other videos that I was talking about grass, is that make sure, a couple of things, make sure when you're drawing grass, you have good references, they have good color range and good tonal range. So basically you have reference, for example, you see I have something on the top left corner and it doesn't look super cool on this zoom out because there are pixels everywhere. But basically, when I have a picture that had a lot of different shades of grass, they have a lot of different types of grass. It has like green grass, it has a little bit older grass, it has fresh grass, and it has dead grass that is brownish and, beigey color. And you also want to make sure that this picture has a lot of range in darkness. So it has, for example, very deep shadows and it has good highlights. So you have everything you need to grab color and tone wise for the grass, and you have a lot of color variation. So it doesn't look like flat green. Make sure your grass is not flat green and it just doesn't have highlights and shadows. And actually, I know there is like a technique that you can draw when people like draw in monochrome and then add colors where things do look like shapes. I would personally not recommend it. I would pay attention to color range that you're using and making sure that you have a lot of colors, because variation of colors create this complexity. And I would also recommend constantly merging whatever you're drawing with the environment. For example, you see how I have atmosphere and fog, and how I constantly blend the colors of atmosphere with the grass and make sure those things interact. I think also one of the beginner mistakes is when you're drawing something digitally, you draw every object almost separately, and it can create this weird feeling of almost collage, like a photo collage. Though, like, I understand where it's coming from, because, for example, if you're using references, all your reference are pieces from different parts of, like, they're different images. They're not together in the same environment. But what you're drawing, you have different objects in the same environment. And it is very important to blend them. So as much as you're grabbing colors from your references, make sure you're grabbing colors from the environment that you're drawing. It's just gonna create more put together look that is really looking more solid and looks like a more mature level of drawing. So this is what I would recommend. One more thing that I would recommend for the grass is just keep in mind that the ground the grass grows on is not flat. Most of the times, there's definitely cases of flat ground, but most of the time, but it's even the flat one still has those bumps. So ground is not flat, it has bumps, and grass would mirror those bumps. And also make sure you don't make your bumps all the same size, the same length. Don't make them uniform. Don't make them look like just scattered noise pattern. Don't make things look uniform, because in nature things are not uniform. Things are very different sizes and scales all the time. And keep in mind that you have different category of sizes. You have, for example, large, small, and medium. Keep in mind that like there's 3, and as you look in at different bumps that you're drawing, realize, are they all medium? Are they all medium and small? Do I have a couple that are large? Keep in mind and make sure you have all like levels of them. So check whatever you're drawing. So that's all I would mention for the grass. One thing I'm also going to mention about me drawing it right now is that keep in mind, if you want to show, well, ideally you always want to show, but if you want to show how close things are to the camera, and for example, in my case, and they're not only close to the camera, they will be close to the characters, and characters I will defocus. For example, there's a couple things to think. Where do you want the camera to focus? And what do you want to show to be closer to the camera? And there's a couple things you can do that. First, in my case here, I want camera and the attention of the viewer focus on the creatures. That's why, as you can see, I'm adding almost this vignette effect, and I'm darkening the ground as it comes closer to the camera, almost make it lose details. That's why your eye doesn't necessarily look to what is closer to the camera. It does focus on the creatures where I want you to focus on. Another thing, it's not exactly what I'm doing here, but keep in mind when you draw objects that are closer to you, it's a good rule to remember that shadows should be darker and lights should be brighter. So the objects that are closer to you, you should draw them a little bit more contrasty, and the objects that are far away from you, they should look a little bit more washed out. That's partially because this is how atmosphere works. As objects are more far away from you, the air has almost its own small layer of color and has its own density. You know how objects in water, if they're farther you from away and you're underwater diving, for example, those objects gonna almost fade into this haze that water has. Air also has it. It's more transparent, however, it's still there. And another reason why you want to do that is because this is just standard traditional art trick. This is how you want to highlight the things that are closer to you. Just highlight the highlights more and darken the shadows a little bit more. And even if you're drawing line art, if your drawing is just lines, ideally in traditional art, it is a rule basically the line that is closer to you should be thicker and darker, and the lines that are farther away from you should be lighter. So this is a very traditional art trick. I like adding defocus on top of it, but I always keep in mind this kind of rule of thumb. So that's about it that I wanted to mention for the grass in particular. So I thought maybe I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about the creatures that I keep drawing. I keep referring to them as monsters, but the actual name in the story is firstborns. And just thought I'll just tell you a little bit about them, a little bit something about my comic in example. So those creatures are actually the first kind of struggle my characters get to deal with. I'm not going to face my characters with all the actual plot struggles right away. It's just a small inconvenience. Well, small, it's not small inconvenience. It's just a first inconvenience and the problem that my characters have to deal with as they arrive into this world. Tsukai, one of my protagonists, she arrives. She was born in human world. This whole thing is very new to her. And another character, he has been born in this world. However, he spent a lot of time in human world, and he's coming back to a lot of unpleasant surprises. So those creatures, they are not native to Northern Province, and they're kind of the beginner of a lot of tension and conflict that starts to build up in the province, and provinces are like countries in my story. So they can be pretty huge, they can have their own culture, and different provinces, they are really very different. So those creatures, they're not native to Northern Province, and at some point they just started to appear. It's all started from the time when one village was destroyed by the whole pack of them, and since then they've been infesting the Northern Province and creating a lot of troubles for the people who live there, because people didn't have their cities and villages protected from creatures like this. They had to do whatever they can to protect their cities and whatnot. And also every time you have to travel between the villages, before it was pretty safe, and now it is so not, because those creatures just running around in the woods, and they seem to be very determined to actually attack Silanians, not just, prey. Overall, they don't act like wild animals. They're not wild animals. They seem to be sentient. And another thing that creates troubles for the characters is that you cannot really kill this creature without consequences, because how rules work in my world is that you get stigma or like a mark on the back of your neck every time you commit a crime. And crime, there's just 3 like ancient crimes. There are different levels, like federal, municipal government and whatnot, but basically there's different levels of laws. And one of the ancient laws, the just 3 rules that exist, this comes from very ancient times, where the first ruler of Silana kind of create a pact with its people when it promised to keep peace and make sure everybody is doing fine. Basically, I'm trying not to go into I'm trying not to go into details, because we're going to be here all day. But overall, there were a lot of wars back then, and the first ruler is a very specific type of creature, and they just established peace into the land many years ago, and they promised to rule everybody and make sure there is no more wars between Silanians. And in return, there was like 3 promises that Silanians swore to, and this became very ancient laws that are guarded by very ancient magic. So if other laws, for example, you cross the law, and you will get punished by province, or you will by city or something like this. For example, there are certain punishes that exist. Most of the time you will get banished, or you will have record, like pigeon's gonna remember it, and you will have troubles getting into society again. But for this particular very ancient law, so basically there's just 3. You cannot kill, you cannot steal, and you have to obey Penumbra, this creature that actually rules everybody. So if you cross one of them, you will get the stigma, this mark of the back of your neck, and if you do it again, then you will get second mark, but at the same time you will disappear. Originally, the idea is that you will be banished from the land of Penumbra or whatever, any inhabited Silana or whatnot. And now how it manifests is that you just disappear, and nobody knows where people go when they disappear. Pigeons cannot find them, no way of communication can find them. So that's basically what happens. So, but because of those laws, what is considered murder is killing anyone who can wield magic. Basically, this is the definition of a sentient being in this world, and those creatures can wield magic. And this is why they create such a big problem for people, because every time if you only have to defend yourself from them, you're either at risk of being killed, or ultimately if you kill this creature, not just injure, if you will be the reason why this creature dies, you will get a stigma, or if you have a stigma already, then you will disappear and nobody gonna hear about you ever again, and you don't know where you will go. So that's why those creatures are pretty annoying in that sense, and they seem to have very specific agenda towards Silanians in particular. It seems like they are sentient, and they almost have agenda to attack specifically Silanians. They don't seem to be interested in just, hunting for food. They're there to create a lot of problems, and they're gonna be a major plot point later on. We're gonna learn about them more and more, and they're only presented in the beginning as a problem, but they are not the problem. They're not the problem at all, and it might be that they're actually being treated really badly. But the reason why they're called firstborns, and because, as I mentioned in my story, there those two main races, and Kondra and Akandu. Kondra is like the guy that you see on the left, actually two guys. You see another one underneath him, and they kind of have black hair, those pointy ears, tails, and just two toes on their feet. So in another race, they basically have just white hair. So basically the main difference is the hair color difference, but the idea is that they're created by two different gods, by the god of light, not like of light, his name is light, and darkness. So they're two huge archetypical gods that created two of those different creatures. And there is a belief that before each of these gods created this race, like Kondra or Akandu, they created a creature as a test first. So each of them had their like first test and trials before they actually settled for the creature. And for Kondra, there were those creatures, those firstborns, and that's why they're called firstborns, because they're technically firstborns of darkness. And then Kondra are technically secondborns and like the more superior creatures, because they have more intellect, they wield more complex magic, and obviously they can build society and just overall more intellectually developed. However, in the end of the day, obviously I will be touching upon how firstborns, their culture is just not understood, and how they might be, having even more wisdom and knowledge that we understand. However, they are still considered uncompleted beings, because they're just the first try, and there's certain things in the way they act that are not really they're not almost completed, they're not as independent and they could be. And yeah, so it takes me a long time to explain it. It'll take me a whole comic to explain it, but basically we start with these creatures being introduced as a trouble, and also it creates a lot of tension between races, because technically those firstborns are connected to Kondras, and that's why Kondra people are usually picked to be the ones who are protecting villages and cities from those firstborns, just because they have certain similar traits. They see in the dark better, they hear better, and basically they're better fit to hunt those creatures that somewhat related to, maybe like in a magical way. But it creates certain tensions, because obviously Kondra has to be more endangered to, take this job on. And also it's kind of like comparison being drawn, and it's just not a nice thing. So this some of the tension that I have in my story, and there is one of the trouble that I have with those creatures. I personally really love drawing those creatures. And as I was writing my novel, when I was writing book 2, like part 2, this will be correspondent to volume 2 of my comic, which we still have to get to. Like the first volume will be maybe 25 chapters, and this is chapter 8. But when we go to volume 2, this is where I will be talking in details about those creatures, and I can't wait, because they're pretty interesting, and where they come from, and how they're, at the society, and the way they wield magic. I don't know. This is something that I can't wait to do, but unfortunately, I have to introduce them kind of in a negative way first, and build all this misunderstanding, and make them to be the villain first, the small villain, which they are not. And I'm trying to make no villains in my story whatsoever. But yeah, that's it for today's short episode. So yeah, I hope it was a little bit interesting, a little bit of grass, a little bit of information of my comic. And now, as you can see, I'm adding characters to the front. So yeah, maybe in the next episode we're gonna draw something that is not grass. I don't know, you guys. I'm excited to see what we're gonna draw for the next weekend. I didn't draw it yet, but yeah, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in my very next video. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.